Well, welcome back, everybody. I'm here again with Roy Eugene Davis, a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, and also the spiritual director of Center for Spiritual Awareness, a Kriya Yoga meditation retreat center in Lakemont, Georgia. Thanks for being here with me, Mr. Davis.
I enjoy being with you always.
So I have some questions for you.
All right.
Number one, many people ask me, what is the best way to learn Kriya Yoga? So from your perspective.
The best way to learn Kriya Yoga, of course, is to have good source material, and it helps to have someone who is reliable, trustworthy, who has experience in the practice of Kriya Yoga to relate to. First of all, maybe we should define what Kriya Yoga is. The word Kriya is a Sanskrit word that simply means process or action or procedure. And yoga, in its pure definition, means the holding together of attention and awareness with one's pure essence of being, or true self, which is why we call that awareness self-realization, or experience and knowledge of our true nature. So Kriya Yoga is not a separate yoga system. There are various yoga systems: Hatha Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga. But the Kriya Yoga tradition, which I represent as a disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, uses the best procedures or methods of various systems of yoga. And it's a matter of emphasis. Our emphasis is to have this aspiration to experience or realize the ultimate aim of practice, which is spiritual enlightenment. And today, of course, as you know, millions of people are practicing various forms of yoga, mostly Hatha Yoga, and yoga practice for health and psychological improvement. This has value. But in the process, I think many times it is spoiled and commercialized and not completely explained in its as far as the full value of what yoga practice can offer. Of course, Hatha Yoga and the other systems of yoga have their place, but I was always inspired from the very beginning to want to be spiritually enlightened. And when I was with my guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, he encouraged me to that end. His emphasis was always, you can be spiritually awake, and pay attention to the essentials and get it accomplished in this lifetime. So that was his major emphasis. Now I realize that the majority of people who are attracted to the practice of yoga don't have that strong resolve or high aspiration to be spiritually enlightened. They're not even conscious or knowledgeable about what a spiritual enlightenment is. And many people, of course, like in the Bhagavad Gita, they start their practice of yoga because they just want some degree of physical improvement or psychological improvement in their life. They want to avoid or overcome some painful circumstances, or some want psychic power or ability. But I think the emphasis is to aspire to be self-knowing and self-realized, and one will be patient, and they learn how to proceed and stay with the right practices, that over a period of time, years in my experience, they will have satisfying results.
And so how does one know that what they're learning is authentic? How do you know the Kriya Yoga that they're learning is an authentic practice?
Well, the one test is to try it out. When we are aware of procedures that seem realistic and useful, to test them. I remember Paramahansa Yogananda telling that in the early years in 1920s and 30s, when he traveled widely and lectured to big audiences in major cities of the country, now and then a person would come to him and say, "Swami, I enjoy being with you and I enjoy attending your classes, but how do I know what you say is of value to me? And his answer was usually, well, you try it for 6 months and then come back and tell me. So it's you have to try it. You have to do it. And I recall another story about Yogananda. Someone was talking with him and asking questions. How do I know what God is? How do I know that it's possible to be self-realized? How do I know it's possible to be aware of these higher realities? And so-and-so says this, and this book says that. And Master said, you're like a person who's always talking about apples and the various species of apples and what others say about apples, but you haven't eaten an apple. And you're like that with God. Why don't you get busy and take a bite? So that's the key to get involved in the practice.
Okay.
So I was very fortunate. When I was 17 and 18, I was first introduced to yoga philosophy by reading books, and I was attracted to the idea that if you do certain things, you'll have certain results. And you didn't have to be a blind believer, but you could experiment. And then when I met Paramahansa Yogananda, I had his example. He was a good role model, and his encouragement, and his instruction. But he reminded me that I had to do a lot of the work for myself, that I had to be the one to examine my tendencies and drives and tendencies, and learn to live right and do right, and to meditate and have the experience of meditating. So that's what I did. So when I was with him for a little over 2 years before he passed in the early 1950s. And then after that, I was 2 more years in the monastic environment. I was the minister of the Self-Realization Fellowship Center in Phoenix, Arizona at that time, right after he passed, from 1953 to 54, 52 to 53. And I was there all by myself over in Phoenix. I went to California to attend functions at SRF headquarters, like summer convocations and Christmas meditation and so on. But the rest of the time I was there, conducting Sunday services and doing a little counseling, not much, but most of the time living very much as a Trappist monk, although I was a yogi monk. But up in the morning at 4 o'clock, meditating for 4 hours, attending to my work duties on the property during the day, again meditating in the evening for 2 or 3 hours in the early evening, and that was my routine for 2 years. So I learned by doing, and the experience was very beneficial.
So individuals who are not necessarily in a monastic environment, after they've been practicing for a year or so, how do you recommend that they live their life or approach the practice for the first few years to really get into it and make it stable?
Not everyone can live or is even is attracted to or adapted to the monastic life. But everyone can decide to be self-disciplined or disciplined to the extent of establishing their priorities. And so if they work and have a family, or married and have a family, whatever they're doing in secular life, they can still set aside time every day for inner examination and meditation practice, and for a little bit of inspirational or informative reading, not too much. I don't recommend reading too widely diverse opinions and getting all confused, but reading good basic information for inspiration and to acquire necessary knowledge, and then put into practice what we learn. I think that's the important thing. All Enlightenment traditions and most religious traditions teach the importance of ethical living and responsible living and growing to emotional maturity and cultivating or at least having the aspiration to cultivate and have a relationship with a larger reality people call God, Of course, you perhaps know that, I'm sure you do, that the word God, not God, but the word God, is only maybe 1,500 years old since it was innovated, because it comes from Dutch and Old German languages. The word God is not used, of course, in the Old Testament or the New Testament, which is written in Greek, and certainly not in the Eastern Scriptures. But the first appearance of the word God, when it evolved from Old German, was about in the year about 400, when the first Christian Bible was translated into Old German for the Gothic people. So whatever word we use for that ultimate reality is all right. And however we think about it in the beginning, many people, of course, are not able to conceptualize, imagine, or relate to an impersonal, transcendent reality. And so they think in terms of God as a person, or having a personal interest in them, or having wishes and desires and will for them in the world order. But sooner or later we outgrow those ideas, or should I outgrow them in due time, and begin to contemplate that ultimate reality as it is, which has an absolute or pure essence, which is transcendent, incomprehensible, but realizable, incomprehensible to the mind, because the mind has limits. But and also there is an expressive aspect of it with energetic characteristics. A Sanskrit word is guna, which make possible a manifestation of universes. And so this in the last several years has been my idea and awareness and increasing realization of what that ultimate reality is. My experience is it becomes more clear and more real in the course of time. I've never had any dramatic enlightenment revelations that sudden dramatic conversion experiences. My experience over the years has been progressive clarity of awareness, more understanding, expansion of consciousness, more insight that has just sort of happened over the years. And thankfully it's continuing.
So for individuals who are steady on the path, I remember you telling the story one time about how you asked Yogananda if many of the sages and saints in the autobiography of Yogi were fully awake or enlightened. And he said, not many, or you can tell the story, not many.
Yes, I used to visit him when I met him in 1949 at Christmas time, the Christmas season. I was only at the SRF headquarters 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. And then he sent me over to Phoenix, Arizona to help with a center there. But he said, come back to see me every 2 months. So for the next 2 years, every 2 months I took the bus from Phoenix to California, wherever he was, and spent a few days with wherever he was and had private time with him. And in the summer of 1950, he was living for the most part at his retreat house out in 29 Palms, California, where he had chosen to live in order to have seclusion and for freedom to write commentaries on Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures. And I used to visit him there. And I never went to him with a lot of pressing questions. I had access to philosophical information in books. I'd heard him speak publicly and privately to disciples, so I knew what he taught. But I went for his Sanskrit word darshan, which means perception of divinity, just to be with him. Because when I was with him, just in his presence, I was uplifted, my consciousness was expanded, and he always said worthwhile things, of course, but the main thing was the attunement with his consciousness and what he was at the deepest level. But one time I was over there visiting him, and we were walking around the perimeter of the retreat site, and he was quiet. We chatted for a while. I let him do most of the talking. I found that was most useful. And then he was quiet for a while, and then he asked, "Do you have any questions?" Well, one popped into my head. A few weeks before, I had been perusing his book, Autobiography of a Yogi, and as you know, in the book he told about how when he was a young man, in the early 1900s in India, that he would search out people who were supposed to be saintly, and some probably were, and examine them and sit with them and talk with them. And the thought had come to my mind, I wonder how many of these saintly people by now are fully enlightened and liberated. And so I asked him that question. And that's when he, without hesitation, he said rather nonchalantly, he said, "Oh, not many." He said, "Many saints are satisfied to experience the bliss of God communion, and they don't aspire to go beyond that stage." Then he paused and said, "But you must go all the way," meaning you must wake up completely. And he wasn't finding fault with people who like to meditate to a stage of bliss or spiritual enjoyment or peace of mind or whatever pleases them. He was just saying that's not the end. That's only partial awakening. And but then, of course, I realized there were not many of his disciples that I knew at least, who had gotten to that stage of enlightenment, or not many who were even proficient in meditation practice. Not that they weren't good people; they were good people, good-hearted people, kind, compassionate, caring, devoted to their practices, but not all of them were successful in being fully awake before they passed. But I don't have any judgment about that, but I observe, and mainly because I always was observing myself. How am I doing? Not in comparison to them, but how am I doing? And so I resolved when I began to read books on world religions. When I was in high school, I got books from the county library, and I'm still surprised when I think about it that little Warren, Ohio, a country town, mostly people, factory workers and small farmers, and had books on yoga philosophy and world religions that I could borrow. But when I read about Buddha and other saintly people who were said to be spiritually enlightened, my response was, yes, I can be like that. I want to be like that. And when I was a teenager, I went to a fundamentalist church with my parents, because that's what you do in farm community. And but I never bought into the doctrine that was being taught from the pulpit or in Sunday school. It was just too, to me, it was not realistic. And it was only when I became exposed to so-called Eastern thought or Enlightenment traditions, which have their origins in the East, that doors opened in my mind about the possibilities of self-actualization, that is, bringing forth, eliciting my innate spiritual qualities. And I always thought, well, if others have done it, I can do it. And I want to do it, and I will do it. So I've always had that aspiration and confidence that it's possible. And then, of course, after I spent 4 years in a monastic setting, I felt that I had sufficient time in that vocation, and I withdrew from it and was in the Army 2 years, and in the medical service. It was after Korean War, so I didn't have to serve in a battle zone. And then after that, in 1956, I began to travel and lecture and write and teach and learn by experience how to do it. And so I've been doing it now for the past almost 60 years. And I'm just as enthusiastic just as interested in doing it now as I was when I started out. I realize from observation and experience that only a few out of the many people that I touch and have the opportunity of working with will actually get the message and be able to follow through and have profound, in-depth results, but some will. And it's like Yogananda when he used to lecture to these big crowds in the 20s and 30s, sometimes 2,000, 3,000 at a time in big auditoriums for 8 or 10 days, and then follow up with classes that have 1,000 or 2,000 people at his classes, where he would teach them more intensively and initiate them into meditation practices. And someone asked him one time, how many of those people have stayed with their practices? And he said, not many. But he said, I knew that then, that only a few would stay with it. But I was sowing seeds in the soil of their subconscious minds, hoping that some of them would sprout and do them some good in the future. So we can only hope for the best for people, wish them well, and work as a karma yoga, really. We do our duty, and it's not a matter of ego drive, ego motivation, and our feelings aren't hurt if we don't get the response we would like to have. And we don't feel proud if we do see positive results. We just do our duty. It's what we do, and not attached to what we do or to the results of what we do. So I always felt when I was a teenager that I was called to the ministry. That's a term we use in Christian circles frequently, having a calling. But I felt when I was a teenager that I was called to minister, to teach. And I had no idea at that time what I would teach, because I knew it wouldn't be the fundamentalist Christian doctrine. And it was only later when I learned about yoga and then met Yogananda that I had the opportunity to have more of an awakening and more of an understanding. And since then, things have just unfolded. Most of the positive, worthwhile things that have happened in my life, although I have used my executive abilities and the knowledge that I've been able to acquire to function effectively, but most of the worthwhile things that have happened have just happened spontaneously. It's like grace. It's sometimes unexpected, unasked for, certainly unearned, and occurrences that are a benefit to me and to others. Things that just happen, which sort of, to me, is an indication that I'm on the right track. That life doesn't have to be a matter of constant endeavor, constant effort, and hardship and difficulty and pain and suffering. That life can be enjoyable and satisfying, and actions can be effective. So it's just a matter of finding our right place and playing that role. And of course, in the Sanskrit term for that is dharmic living. Dharma has many shadings of meaning, depending upon the context in which it is used. But generally it means rightness, righteousness or rightness, the right order of things, implies that which upholds, maintains. So whatever we do, whatever in our life upholds and maintains us and the world order, we can say is dharmic. It's righteous. And if we're in our right place in the universe, doing what we are called or destined or best qualified to do, then that is said to be dharmic living. We're living properly. And, for instance, the word Hinduism is a word that was coined or originated by foreign invaders many hundreds of years ago. Knowledgeable Indian people refer to what they teach and believe in their culture and spiritual practices as Sanatana Dharma, the eternal way of rightness, or the eternal right way, often mistranslated simplistically as eternal religion, but it's not religion. The word religion is not even there. It's not in the vocabulary of Indians anyway. But so it's not the eternal religion, it's the eternal way eternal right way of living. Right thinking, right behavior, right contemplation, right aspiration. Very much like the Buddhist precepts for living in the right way. And right motivation, right thinking, right living, right practice, right contemplation. And the result is productive living, so hopefully enlightened, self-realized living, or at least the capacity to be spiritually enlightened. And I remember when I was at that stage, when I was 18, I'd read Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi. Someone else at that time happened to give me a copy of Life magazine, published that year, I think in May of that year. And there was a several-page article, photo illustrated article, telling the story of Ramana Maharshi in South India, in Arunachala. And I remember there was a full-page photo of him with these looking straight out with these luminous eyes, and I thought, wow, I experienced a darshan or a uplift or a blessing just looking at the picture, because he was so obviously so serene, so peaceful, and satisfied with himself at a deeper level that just the picture was uplifting. And of course, people used to visit him or to just be with him and sit with him, and he didn't always talk very much, and so he didn't give public lectures. But now and then people would ask him, how can I be self-realized? And he would answer, it's really very easy. All you have to do is be still. But he was talking about that complete stillness of mind and emotions, the complete settling. Like in the second sutra in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra treatise, where he explains the end result of yoga practice, and that is the quieting of the changes and movements in the mind and awareness which allow the true nature to be self-evident or self-revealed, self-shining. And otherwise, he goes on in the following sutra or verse or aphorism to say, otherwise, attention and awareness is again inclined to identify with the influences that modify mind and awareness. So that's human nature. And people meditate, try to meditate, and common testimony or complaint sometimes is, I can't control the mind. I can't settle my emotions. And so there is that understanding there that contents of the mind have to be quieted, emotions have to be settled. Even the impulses that arise from the unconscious or subliminal levels, from below the threshold of the conscious awareness, the impulses that arise that activate thoughts and emotions have to be pacified. And when that occurs, all that is left is awareness of being, if we don't go to sleep. The key is to stay awake. Don't go to sleep. But just be there in the moment. And all that remains then, I am the witness, I am the observer, I am the knower. I exist. That's it. And there's nothing beyond that to actually experience or to realize. But it sounds simple in talking about it, but obviously isn't that simple to experience, because otherwise there'd be more enlightened people. And but more and more are awakening, and of course in our era, our current time cycle, period of time, there are more people who are becoming at least interested in spirituality, and more people becoming intellectually competent. And of course we still have a large percentage of people who are still too inward directed, too egocentric, and too self-serving, and confused, and so on. But more and more people, we look out on the world scene, we see a lot more people who are becoming responsible for taking care of the planet, taking care of each other, sharing their higher understanding. More and more people are practicing meditation today in all walks of life. Even many people who don't think of enlightenment or the end result of their practice, but they meditate because they say, I function better, I think more clearly, I'm happier, I'm healthier when I meditate on a regular schedule. So this is all to the good. And I remember Paramahansa Yogananda telling me and a few other disciples in 1951, we were talking with him, and he told us about his vision for the future of yoga in the West and in the world. And he said, in the future, yoga will be taught in schools. You will see it. Well, it's happening now. And so more and more people are being open to these ideas and to the possibilities of self-discovery, and that I think this is good.
So, over the many years that you've been practicing and teaching Kriya Yoga, is there any in particular lesson or understanding that you've learned that seems most important to you from the whole practice?
Main thing, I think, is once we are knowledgeable and we know how to proceed, is that we proceed in the right way with right intentions, and that we are persistent in it, but patiently so. I remember one occasion I was visiting Paramahansa Yogananda at his desert retreat, and we were just talking quietly, and he said, sometimes we want to, he was talking very simply, we want to know God, we want to be self-realized very quickly, and this is good, but we have to be patient just in case it doesn't happen the day that you want it to happen. And he used to say, you want it with all your heart, you want to know God with all your heart, and expect to know it every day, but if it doesn't happen, don't give up. And so there's that balance of aspiration and yet patience, because some people can have an instantaneous, dramatic, transformational conversion experience, a spiritual awakening that is authentic and enduring, or the results of which are enduring. But most people awaken little by little. And then even the people who say, I don't see much evidence of progress, if they are living right and attended to their practices, and every now and then look back, not to live in the past, but just to look back and compare how they are now to how they used to be, they will see that they have improved. And also, if they read the literature, Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Sutra, their favorite literature, whatever it might be, regarding spiritual matters, and if they notice that they are understanding it now more clearly, and they're seeing something there they didn't see before, that's evidence of improvement. I know a woman went to Yogananda one time, and she complained that she didn't have any dramatic meditation perceptions, no lights, no thrills up the spine, no ecstasy, no revelations, no contact with spiritual beings. And Master said, well, do you have more peace of mind? Well, yes. Are you more content inwardly? Yes. And so on. I went on and asked her a few more questions. He said, well, you're progressing then. And so don't equate dramatic meditative perceptions with spirituality or spiritual awakening, because many of the meditative perceptions that fascinate some people, they are mind-produced phenomena, or the result of mental agitation or emotional unrest, and not of any great value. So If we have pleasant meditation experiences, that's all right. But if we sit there and say, I've got to feel bliss or deeper experience of bliss or joyousness, or I have to see the spiritual eye, or I have to get out of my body, or I have to have astral vision and clairvoyance. These are time-wasting desires, and we don't need that. Sometimes we can have unusual perceptions, but even then they should be looked at with objectivity. And also, no matter how profound our perceptions seem to be, it can be useful to inquire, well, is there anything beyond this? Is this the end, or is there something beyond this? So that we don't get stuck at any level and think that we've got it, now I've got it all. I have arrived. Now I'm the Messiah now. I'm going to go out and change the world and share my revelations. That's a big trap right there.
Right.
So, just patiently persist in the right way with faith, that is, with conviction that the end result's going to be worthwhile.
One final question. Speaking of getting stuck, after someone's been practicing 5, 10, 20 years, do you have any insights on how to keep the practice alive so they don't get stuck in a rut or a routine and continue to grow and develop?
Well, again, go back to what I just said. Keep inquiring. Is there something beyond this that I should know? Is there something else I should do? Are there any troublesome conditions that I've overlooked that need to be overcome or let go or transcended? So occasional self-evaluation can be helpful. And that's all I know. And also think in terms of sharing whatever enlightenment we have in a constructive way with other people. And we don't all have the mission or even the ability to teach, to write, to teach, to so forth. But we do all have the ability to see for others their highest good and believe on their behalf that they can have it, that they can realize it. And I recommend that every day, not only after meditation, but whenever we think of the world scene or other people, that we just sort of bless the world with our consciousness and radiate goodwill and feel, maybe perhaps imagine that the purity of our essence is blending with the collective consciousness and somehow beneficially influencing everyone and everything. In the Yoga Sutta, Patanjali has the advice for cultivating mental and emotional peacefulness and stability, to think in terms of having a friendly relationship with all people in all forms of life. Be thankful for the good fortune that other people have, and to observe whatever happens in life with dispassionate objectivity. That means without undue emotional reaction. Just observe it. And this way we have a peace of mind and emotional stability even before we are fully spiritually enlightened. In the Yoga Sutra again, in second section, as we call it, second chapter, when Kriya Yoga is specifically discussed, of course, Patanjali mentions Kriya Yoga practice as including constructive discipline of thinking and behavior, self-inquiry, what am I, what is my true nature, using discriminative intelligence and meditative experience, and also letting go of this illusion or this mistaken sense of self-identity, the small confined sense of self-identity. And he says this is what Kriya Yoga practice is, and it is practiced to remove what he calls the afflictions or the troublesome conditions in our in our psyche, and also for the cultivation of samadhi or transcendent realization. So we can remember what is the end result of right practice. And but after meditation, we can sit for a few minutes and just see the highest good for everyone, which is their health, happiness, and most of all, spiritual awareness. And then, whenever we think of someone, or the world conditions are presented to us, as they are almost every day now on television, we, instead of becoming embittered and cynical and disappointed and fearful or depressed, we can say, well, beyond this is a higher possibility. And things are improving, and they'll continue to improve. So we see, it's not a Pollyanna, superficial, childish attitude, like, oh, everything's going to work out all right, and so forth. But actually seeing it in consciousness and having this compassion for everyone in all life, so that we want to the highest and best for everyone, and do our part to see that, and also in our life to help to demonstrate it or help to make it happen, without being forceful. I'm not for being an activist and taking to the streets with placards and banners. I don't think that's our way. But I disapprove with dispassionate objectivity when I see thousands of people taking to the streets and shouting and displaying their anger and their emotion. I don't think that's the way to bring about useful change. Now and then, public demonstration has been necessary in the past, like with Martin Luther King during this period to break down segregation and so forth. Sometimes people have to stand up, let their voice be heard. But most of the time we can live quiet lives and not be exceptional in the eyes of others, just appear to be quite normal, but inside be different. Mm-hmm. I think that's important. The inside, I think, is important. How we are there.
Right. Well, in this time you've covered, I think, the essence of Kriya Yoga and the essence of how to practice well. So I want to thank you.
You're welcome.
For being here.
It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah. And I'll put a link to the website for CSA, which is csa-davis.org. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So if you want to learn more about the retreat center here and Mr. Davis's work, it's csa-davis.org. And thank you very much.
All right. You're welcome.